Hi Comets, and welcome to Telescope Talks, a product of the Telescope. I am Lexi Thurman. I'm a staff writer here at the Telescope, and I'm here with Sofia Alvarez.
Hello, I'm the social media and podcast editor here.
And we are here to talk about bias in media today.
And yeah, we're just going to talk about their positive and negative effects. Alrighty, so Lexi kind of brought this idea up to me, and it seemed really interesting, and I just wanted to ask, what made you want to talk about this in a podcast?
Well, to me, it's actually really personal to me, media bias, because of how much I've seen it affect the people around me and my family and friends, and the fact that it's not just, expressing opinions, it's what those opinions do and how they can translate to your lives, to people's lives as a whole, and how it can. The biggest argument I have is that it increases the polarization of our population and just hatred and fear and anxiety towards the other side, if you will, and the people of the other side, quote unquote. Yeah, and
I also think as two journalism majors actively writing for our student newspaper, learning about biases is something very apparent in the news industry and also in media and in our social media and in all forms of media too. So I think that's important in all aspects.
Yeah, I think especially with that perspective that we have, we are taught to not show our bias.
Right.
So it's really interesting to see in the real news world how much that is a lot of the times just forgotten about. I guess it is. I think it's important. I understand that there are other, views of it, but I can go ahead and state my first source.
This says it. So we're kind of divided it as negative impact and positive impact. So we're going to start with the negative impact.
Yes.
In bias in media. Okay.
Yes. So overall, I think that when we share information, it should be coming from a non-biased point of view so that people can make their own decisions on things. And when we don't do that and we stay in our, bubbles of perspectives, what is that called? I can't remember the name.
Echo chambers.
The echo chambers. Yeah. When we stay in our echo chamber, you reinforce your ideas, and when people don't share those reinforced ideas, you're like, oh, well, you got to be wrong, and I don't like you, kind of thing. And so that it just leads to a lot of hate and distrust in one another when it's not really necessary, when we can have different ideas and still get along and understand each other. And so according to Flavia Rossini, a student at Pardee School of Global Studies at Boston University, and she specializes in international communication. She says, the divisive tone of cable news has become the very nature of its appeal, and this type of journalism hardens polarization because the more political media one consumes, the more warped the perspective of the other side becomes. And I think this is really important because it's not that we have two different opinions and we can come together and, meet a common ground. It's that we've so far gone to each side and are unable to see that middle ground.
Right. That's completely valid, and I think, I can't speak for you, but for myself, I'm for sure a victim of that. It's so easy to being biased in media, especially on Instagram. If I'm assuming, is Instagram one of your main social media sources?
Yes.
Or, it's so easy to be able to just only be on your side of news.
100%, because the algorithm, it forces you almost.
Yeah, right. No, totally. And even I can it's even hard for me to find a middle ground with somebody that is so far on the other side of me, you know what I mean? So I completely, even though it sucks and it should not be like that, it is the truth, you know what I mean? And, and it is harmful in ways because it's kind of sad how humans are not able to find middle ground anymore, in political ways, economical ways, environment, social ways, you know what I mean, period, so it's that's cool.
It's almost not our fault because of this is why I'm bringing up the media and bias in media, because it's almost not our fault anymore, because when we're watching these things, the top two, according to, what is this? According to according to Adweek, the top two news sources are MSNBC and Fox News. Yeah. And when you're watching things like that, and according to all sides, those two are far left and far right.
Right.
Which we knew that.
Yes.
But when we are watching that, it's almost impossible to not develop those, you can't see the other side because you're told by those things that the other side is awful. Wrong, they're terrible people. It's like, how do you not go
and
about
I think that's like the bad part of journalism too, especially when you're writing like hard hitting news like that. Like, it's kind of like you can't do that in journalism. You can't say...
We're taught not to.
We're taught to write the facts, you know what I mean? And the facts are facts, and the way people perceive that is just a whole other thing. But in the sense of you saying that it's not our fault, is Fox News or, right side news or left side news doing that thing where you're like, okay, these are the facts, but also the other side is completely wrong. Like, only listen to us, don't look at the other side. Like, they're wrong, So that is kind of scary because, like, even though both sides can have facts, that little part of, like, kind of having you not trust the other side or not letting you see the other side is a very big problem in bias in media today. And, it's a huge thing.
But it can, I feel like it can seem overwhelming, and the other side just overwhelmingly has to be bad. But when you really think about it, it's almost impossible because there's no way that one person can have no right views, you have to, there's some legitimacy in anything that anyone is saying. They have a view for a reason, and I came from a very liberal family, and in my view, as I've progressed, I think it was too much in some areas, and I would see the news every day, and the way that they would portray the other side, and that I internalized it, and I will reflect on it. I hated anyone from the other side. I genuinely, I didn't tolerate. If I found out that one of my friends were on the right, I cut them off, and I'm not proud of it.
I completely did the same thing, and I think that was me a lot during like that whole era of like where we were really, I don't know. I feel like I had this whole era on Instagram where I was like reposting every single thing. I was super like adamant on, because I also grew up from a liberal household. I feel like we come from similar sides, and I used to do the same thing where the second that I saw somebody post something that was like not what I align with, unfollow, did not talk to, cut off,
which isn't okay. There's no conversation.
And now I'm grown and I like, wait, that is actually so childish of me. And I've kind of learned that like everybody has, it's impossible for people to not to have the same exact values and ideas as you. You know what I mean? And that's not a valid reason to not communicate with them and then to not have an open conversation with them to learn to why. Because again, coming back to it, it's also not their fault as to why they have these values and beliefs and whatever. As to me, same for me. It's not my fault that I believe in the things that I do because of what media I see and what media I consume. You know what I mean? So,
and I feel like we would have more, I guess, responsibility over our beliefs if we weren't fed them. I think if we were able, I feel like we were used to, and it's now become, a lot of news broadcasts in particular, you need views for money, and so getting that entertainment part of it, which is the biggest part of making it entertaining by calling people names and making it dividing so that you get those views, and so I feel like we would have more responsibility over our views if that's not how it was portrayed. If we were able to think about these things ourselves, make our own views, not have them fed to us, so that we could form that understanding of the topic and talk about it with people. And I think a middle ground would be so much more possible.
Oh, for sure. It's kind of sucky because it seems like you have such a clear idea, and I feel like so many people around me, and I'm sure you have such a clear idea of that, and we're able to have an open conversation about this. But when it comes to like the real world or whatever, like it seems like so many people lack that knowledge, which is like, it's kind of like scary. Like people advocate for like peace and unity and stuff, but then the second that they don't have, like what we were just talking about, the second they meet somebody that has slightly different opinion than them, that's like completely closed off. And I'm like, aren't you also part of the problem? You know what I mean? Like it's crazy.
It's to the point that, I'm not even on the right, but I kind of, it's iffy sharing what I'm sharing right now, because it's like, sure. I used to be on the side that I was, cutting people off because I didn't agree, so, and it sucks. Like you just said, it's sucky because I have friends now that are on the other side and I can see how wonderful of people that they can be. And, they're probably, most of them are, but I don't know. We have painted both sides in such a negative light from each respective side has. It's really difficult to function as a society like that.
I think also we can also like cut this out, but one main thing that I kind of was raised with and kind of realized very early on, and I've always carried with me, despite the whole era we had of cutting people off that had different opinions than us or whatever, it's hard for like, and I don't know, it's hard for like humans to be unified under a man-made system that causes separation. The man-made system being, Democrats and Republicans, that is like made to separate us, and it's like, I feel like sometimes, not sometimes, but I feel like the answer for unity that I think both sides kind of strive for, I don't know, but you know what I mean? But like, we kind of have to look past that.
I think so. Yeah.
And I think media and biases in media make that impossible. And I think people, even though they may see that, it's so like much and it's all around us, like they don't want us to know that answer, of unity, but that's just my take on it. And it's sad that there is so much biases and separation that causes this continuum of hatred,
Yeah, and I feel like going back to the bias of media, but incorporating what you just brought up, I think inherently having two sides is inherently dividing. Yeah. But I feel like it wasn't as bad as it is now, and I think with the bias in media, it has exacerbated which side is supposed to think kind of thing. Yeah. So much to the point that it's like when you vote, it says this side voted for this, and a lot of people just vote based on that, know. And so it's like even when I might view myself as a Democrat, but I could share some views with Republicans. Well, what does that make me? It's like like the two make no sense in itself. It's like, am I not allowed to view anything from the other side?
No, completely valid.
Yeah,
valid.
I think they're a little pointless. I agree. It creates that division.
Yeah, and it's also like, could it also be, you think, like the lack of knowledge thereof,
What do you mean?
Like with what you were just saying about like voting and stuff, or just like in politics in general, like in like leaning on one side more than the other, like could there just be just having access, like, just like, okay, speaking from personal experience, a lot of my peers base their political views only from what they see on social media and only what they see from TikTok and Instagram, you know what I mean? But could there be more of a change of, especially like our generation, read more actual truthful news from like unbiased sources like AP News or something like that? You know what I mean? Like,
I do know what you mean. Yeah, I think that's where we need to head, and I feel like that's probably where we are heading. I don't think it's just us that are, upset. Yeah. I know you were taking the positive side of bias in media, but I feel like you can see my side at least.
100%.
And I think a lot of people are upset with bias in media, and I think that is where we are going to. I believe eventually people are going to be fed up enough that the fact that they are watching something that is making them hate the other side, and I mean, how far do we need to start killing each other before it's a wake up call, so I feel like that's where we're going, and I think there is a push for knowledge and to be informed, and I maybe it's my bias personally with journalism and knowing what I do, but I personally think that that's a value in people, but and I think we'll be moving towards that.
I personally think so too, especially like I feel like there has been such a shift in I mean, also in our like how old are you?
I'm 18.
18, I'm 19. So like I feel like in our like generation or whatever, like I feel like we have also been striving to know more, you know? So I agree. I think it's easier said than done, but I hope that's the direction we're going, because I think that's the right direction to go, you know, in order to, I don't know.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think just overall coming to middle ground is where we need to try to get to.
And I so wish that, and I so wish that one day everything will just click in their heads and they'll just stop being, you know, engulfed in all this stuff. But back to what you're saying about, you know, the positives in media bias, I was in control of looking for that. And honestly, I was pretty surprised, because I thought this was going to be like an easy something to research, but honestly, no, it was not. And I did find this one article from the Columbia Journalism Review, and it's an opinion piece, but it's called Bias is Good, It Just Needs a Label. And it's saying how the article is basically saying how bias is real and bias is a thing, but it just has a bad rep kind of thing. And even though like yes and no, I was reading it more, and it kind of gave me the straightforward answer. It said pieces on the opinion end of the spectrum, any opinion pieces, critical reviews, any piece that has the writer's subjective writing in there helps us to explore our feelings on issues and sharpen our political views. They soften our perspectives or crystallize them. We like bias in these articles and know to expect it, which honestly makes sense. As obvious as it sounds, it does make sense. You know, we read what we read, and we read on one side and not really read on the other, because that crystallizes our idea. You know what I mean? And I know we were just talking about like trying to see both sides, and, you know, and having, you know, gaining knowledge and trying not to only stick to one side. But I do see myself, you know, but I do see myself mainly reading what I believe in, because that's what I believe in, and it helps me, like the article said, crystallize that.
I don't think it's a bad thing to know what you believe in.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think it's two different things of, you know, setting, knowing where you stand and being unwilling to, you know, compromise. Yeah. I think you can know where you stand and still understand another person's opinion. Yeah. But it's a different thing to, you know, hate the other side for a different opinion.
Well, I also think that the good direction to take when reading news and whatnot is to acknowledge that this isn't the only side. I feel like one side of bias in whatever source you're reading, it should rather help you seek to learn other perspectives of it, rather than just have you only stick to that one spot. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
I think so. Do you mean like ending an opinion article with a counter argument or something like that? Because that's another thing we're taught to do, but we don't see that in the news. Like it's just the opinion.
Well, I think that also goes with like that entertainment part of big news streaming sources. You know, they kind of need that to pull people in more, and they know that people will be pulled into that so easily. But I think a good shift in that is, instead of, you know, pulling them in and making them stay there no matter what, open up that conversation and have them seek out those other sources and other perspectives and whatnot.
Yeah, it's like that, opening up that conversation. Yeah, I think it's critical, but it's something that would lower viewers. Yeah, you know?
And I think that's kind of the sad part, because journalism is all about diversity of perspective. You know what I mean? And if an article is not allowing that, and if a news source is not allowing that, then it's kind of iffy to me, right? I don't know. It's kind of, I don't know, but
no, and I think part of what you read off there was it just needs to be known of your article or your opinion. I think
right. Yeah. And so a big part of the telescope when we write our opinion articles, our opinion editor, she makes it apparent that in the beginning of your article you need to state what your opinion is, right? But you also don't want to like have them latch onto that. You know what I mean? You want to be able to write that will able to, like, again, what I said, diversify your perspective. You know what I mean? But
yeah, I don't think any of our opinion pieces that we write, I don't think we're like, this is the right way. You know, there's a conversation allowed in there. You're
Correct,
very welcome to. In things such as, you know, the Rachel Maddow show, or what is the Fox News version of that? I forgot his name.
Oh, man.
Jesse Waters. Rachel Maddow and Jesse Waters. Those are two examples of, you know, like opinion broadcasting from the left and to the right. It's those two don't give us that example of, you know, conversation. It's only their opinion, their way of seeing it, their presentation of the news in their way. And it doesn't allow for that conversation. I think that is really the issue. There's no room for the conversation.
I think that's a big main point we made during this whole episode is there is a lack of acknowledging both sides and allowing to have that open-minded conversation. I feel like that's just such a big issue in mainstream media now. It's just like it makes you close-minded, which is not the right thing. You know what I mean? But yeah, hopefully
we are able to move to a better place. And I think the takeaway from this, if you're still listening, just to be more open to opinions, even if you are,
though if it differs from yours,
even if it's uncomfortable. Yeah. Listen to them. Someone always
be uncomfortable and seek that other perspective.
The perspective of anyone exists for a reason. Yeah. Find the reason, find why they believe that. Yeah. There's got to be some legitimacy in there, and you will understand them more as a person.
And don't feel at fault for like being like, oh wait, maybe I am biased. We're all biased. Do you know what I mean? But it's a different thing if you're not open-minded to literally the world around you and to all these different perspectives. You know, that's where people fail at.
Yeah.
But yeah.
All right. Thank you guys for listening to our podcast today.
Make sure to follow us on our social media. Our Instagram is _telescope.
Have a good day, comments.
Thank you. Bye.